But I think the first humanoid prototypes that'll be in people's homes, prototypes, not mass produced, things like that, under 5 years.
They want like a pre-made, done-for-you business solution.
I think Maids is great, but they referred me to this ding-dong company that I don't like very much.
Sure. When you look at the numbers, it looks like a good opportunity, but then you realize the business has been under 250K revenue and it's been in business for 10 years. To me, that's a little suspicious rather than a good opportunity.
I mean, here's the way I see like quality. It's 5s or nothing.
You're not profitable enough to bring someone on to help.
There's very little regulation. There's very little like stopping you from being successful.
Welcome back to the Balanced Business Podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to have Matt Ricketts, CEO of Better Life Maids. Matt talks business and advisor to a popular cleaning company booking software, Maids Central, who many of us know. Matt's going to be joining us today as a seasoned cleaning business owner and an industry expert whose influence and insights have influenced many of us, including myself, in the cleaning industry. Under Matt's leadership, Better Life Maids has achieved remarkable success, passing the $2 million a year annual revenue mark, including several prestigious awards in the St. Louis area. And in today's episode, we're going to be diving into Matt's journey of starting Better Life Maids, some of the pivotal steps he took to grow it and continue to grow it. And we're also going to be discussing his insightful views on the cleaning and home service industry in general, because he posted a very insightful article recently that I wanted to talk to him about. So, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'll do just 2 corrections to your intro. So I have no more formal relationship with Maids Central. So Tom officially bought me out as of last year so that I could focus on my own business and help wherever I could be, where there wouldn't be conflict. So, you know, I'm happy to advise anyone on their, you know, products and systems and tools. So not any formal relationship there, but still obviously using the software and friends with them. And then actually our budget this year is about 4.4 to 4. Let's just say 4.4. We'll comfortably hit that. And we hit about 3.8 last year. We're slowing down this year to focus on, talk about operational excellence. We're just making sure the wheels don't spin off because we've grown 40% a year for the last 3 years. And we're going to dial it back a little bit this year and focus on what it's going to take to sustain that.
I think it's fair to say you've grown a little bit since we last talked then.
Yeah, we've had the last 3 years have been substantial growth. So we're on a doubling every 2.8 years kind of trajectory right now. We probably will make the Inc. 5000 this year. You know, we'll probably still grow 18 to 20% this year. But again, we're focusing on some internal management structures and systems that it's going to take to expand outside of our market. And, you know, just dialing it back a little bit and focusing on profitability and sustainable growth for the future.
This is a question I'll have for you soon on this podcast, actually, about profitability. Because one of the
Sure.
problems I see recently is a lot of people, and we're doing this ourselves to a limited degree, but a lot of new owners are coming in and doing micro acquisitions and rolling up locations, which is great. It's a valid strategy, but they're not very profitable when I talk to them. So it'd be interesting for us to talk about in a little bit how you're maintaining profitability as you scale.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can dive into that a little bit. I mean, like we're a 1 location operation and we've got some economy of scale. I think the whole micro location thing, I don't think anyone should have any business running a location unless they have at least 10 employees in that location. And for my company, 10 employees would be 1 to 1.2 million. I mean, we're generating almost 100,000 to 120,000 a head. I would struggle to think that, you know, if I was acquiring a business, if they had less than 10 employees, that it would be an acquisition that would be healthy. There's just so much that can go wrong with a couple of providers. And, you know, there's a lot of ways to measure profitability, but like EBITDA kind of like levels the playing field a little bit where you kind of, because they're probably using some debt to do this. Is that correct? Like they're using some, you know, probably seller finance and having to pay these people back and doing some of this. Like, so are they profitable before that, or is it even tight before that? Because, you could make the argument that if you can pay it back in 3 years and you're tight in the short run, that's okay. But, if their EBITDA is below 10%, they're going to struggle to even pay that back, and that puts them at risk.
So as a typical example, when I say micro, I really mean micro. So these are businesses, locations doing less than $250,000 a year in revenue. So they might do anywhere from like 5 to 15K a month in revenue. So they may have been around a couple of years. They may have a solid reputation in the community and some SEO, well-ranked keywords and so on, but they're not locations that have prospered, and grown very quickly. And so some of the micro acquisitions that I'm seeing popular right now anyway are in that kind of under 250K annual revenue range where they're tiny. They're a couple of teams, they're a website, right? It's typically a contractor-based model recently that people are acquiring. So
what's a business like that sell for? I guess it depends on what you bought it for. I guess what is something like that selling for? If it's one times like SDE or EBITDA, like earnings for the year annualized, then that probably makes sense. If it's 3 times, then that's tricky. There's a lot of risk there. So
it is quite a range.
I think it's interesting. You talk about profit margins that I think are healthy.
One of the big things I think at that range is it's hard to be profitable. Certain expenses scale well past the $500,000 mark range, which I think are kind of outsized expenses below that mark. And so I think actually when you're smaller, it's a little harder to be profitable. If you're solo, that's a different story. But if you're a small location with teams and overhead, I actually think it's a little harder to stay as profitable as you could be than when you get a little bit bigger.
Yeah, think about it. So we're at, and I think we're a little bit too heavy. If I back out my marketing team from my overhead, our overhead for office expenses is 11.3 before I back them out, probably like 9.5, maybe 9. I haven't actually gone through the process of backing them out and just putting them. We're doing this now. We're actually reworking our P&L, and we're taking those people's salaries and then we're putting them on the marketing, part of the P&L, part of the budget. But 11% on $250,000 isn't going to pay a lot of overheads. So yeah, I can see that. But if you rolled up 4 of them, then you probably could have 2 dispatch type employees perhaps, or 1 and maybe some part-time help, I suppose.
I just got the tail end of it. But this is one of the reasons I'm a little wary about some people diving too quickly into the acquisition field. I think you have to have a supporting structure in order for it to make it work. And what I mean by that is, for example, we're kind of uniquely positioned in that I run a cleaning company, but I also run a VA company. So my VA company can run my cleaning companies much more cheaply because we have an in-house team able to do it cheaper, right? There's a sort of economy of scale there that works for me that might not work for others. So when we acquire a location, we're not acquiring a totally independent manager for that location. Our in-house team is running it. So it's essentially like another client at a break-even cost. So we're able to acquire a location from day 1. And by day 90, we've cut their expenses by 1/3 and we've increased their profit margins significantly. So by doing nothing else than keeping it in-house, we've been able to make that location profitable at times where it wasn't profitable at all before. So if you have other supporting structures in place, which could assist you with running the company more efficiently, I think micro acquisitions make sense. But if you're a new owner coming into the space and you see what looks like a good opportunity, when you look at the numbers, it looks like a good opportunity, but then you realize the business has been under 250K revenue and it's been in business for 10 years, to me, that's a little suspicious rather than a good opportunity, right? They may have a good reputation, they may have good teams, but there's something very wrong there if it's been a small business for so long. There's something that you're not seeing there, and there's a reason why it's being sold at that stage, rather than a healthy company being sold because the owner wants to exit, right?
I think that's all true. I think you talked about like the systems and support structures that certainly at scale, I think multiple locations become easier because one HR department, one sales department, all those things can be run centralized. And maybe I'll do a little bit more of an in-depth article on this pod structure that we're doing. But really, I believe a pod is like the minimum viable product, which is a field supervisor, which is, an 80 to 90% production position. And they're, doing some field meetings and some other things and some basic management. And they could probably do that, but we have it for 12 right now, but we believe we could expand that out to about 20 per pod leader. And 12 is probably healthier than 20. We'll find out what the limit is on how many they can healthily manage and support without diluting the time too much.
Yes. Ooh, we dived right into it today. Man, there's a lot of directions I want to take this, but I had a question for you about a recent article that you wrote on LinkedIn. So I'm wondering if we could jump slightly over to the article, because there's a couple that I think relate to our conversation on micro acquisitions very well. So there's kind of two questions on that. I'll just ask the first one just because we were talking on micro acquisitions, and part of your piece discusses the entry of private equity into small businesses, right? And so I'm curious if you could talk a little bit further for people who maybe haven't read the article yet. I'll link it into the show notes. If you could provide some insight into some of the trends and research you've noticed around private equity entering the home services and specifically the cleaning business space, because when they acquire home service businesses, I think it's at a very different scale and they have a lot of levers they can pull that some of us small business owners and investors can't pull. So I'd be curious if you could talk a little bit about private equity trends.
Yeah. So you're if you're not really aware of it today, private equity owns a lot of the home services, probably in a lot of the major markets and starting to trickle into other markets. There's some that are massive, like Gettle. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're out in Las Vegas, Phoenix, and some other locations. Funny name, but huge home service company in the HVAC and I believe plumbing space. A1 Garage Doors is a great example of a company that was purchased recently. A lot of people know Tommy Mello. I don't think it's anything Tommy hasn't shared, so I won't be spilling the beans. But roughly $700 million for a garage door company, and the exit was at 28 times EBITDA, a turn of 28 times their profit margin. EBITDA is just a clever way of saying what you make by equalizing it against businesses that have and don't have debt, basically. Because when private equity comes in, probably half of the money that they're going to put into the new business to buy it, they're going to leverage probably 50%. So anyway, they're coming in, they're putting a lot of money into the industry, they're creating consolidation, they're finding ways to make these businesses more and more profitable. And what's interesting is the bigger you get it, right? The closer that it's trading to like a Wall Street company, the bigger they can justify the SDE turn, or we talk about sellers' discretionary earnings, but EBITDA, the multiple that they'll give. So like, it's not unusual for a stock that you might buy to have 20 times earning it's trading for, right? 30 times earnings for like some fanciful company that you're buying stock in. So, it would take 30 years of profits to pay back the valuation they've created, on Wall Street for these companies. Well, we're lucky in our industry right now that if you were to sell your business today, this is if you have like $1 million business. We talked about micro businesses earlier. You might get 2 to 3 times sellers' discretionary earnings. We don't generally have enough sophistication even in how we have our profit and loss set up that we can equalize that. So we just have to go to sellers' discretionary earnings and be like, all right, well, I paid my cell phone. That counts as something. Like, you're backing out all the things that you gave yourself, including a salary and profits, to come up with a reasonable price. And again, that's 2 to 3 times earnings today. But what I see for a future for the house cleaning industry is, as technology has enabled some of our businesses to grow and we've learned more, become more sophisticated, I'm seeing it become more common for there to be $2 million, $4 million, $5 million companies. Yeah. That is not all that unusual. In fact, on my block, there's two $2 million companies, my company being 4, and one literally across the street from me. I can throw a football to her office and she's right across the street. And like, She's a $2 million business. One less than a mile away from me is an $8 million franchise. And then a 3.6 within one other. So he's 2.4 miles away. Think about that. That's like close to $20 million of companies within, a 3-mile circle of each other, right? Like, and I'm not saying that that's common today, but it's going to become more common as we become more sophisticated operators and solve for this. Private equity is not looking to buy like little companies because they don't want to come and run the business. They need there to be professional management in place, technology in place, and they're going to apply financial controls, put money into it, and they're going to go into a market and try and consolidate, that $20 million. They would make offers that you would have a hard time walking away from, right? So a company that might have in the past, so if interest rates weren't so high, I would say you might get 7 or 8 times earnings by a PE-backed company for a company across the street from me. Like if they were wanting to roll us together, they might pay me 10 or 11 or 12 in the good old days before interest rates got up this high, and said, Matt, we need you and your leadership team to run it, and we'll bring these other folks in. We'll give them a seat at the table. We'll give them some stock, and we're going to buy them out and bring them into the system. Now, on top of that, right? Like they're tracking all the money that they put into the system after your share. So that all has to get paid back before you get your stock back, I don't know if we want to get into how deep we want to get into like how you get paid out of this, but regardless, today the opportunity is you're going to get maybe 2 or 3 times earnings. If PE takes an interest in our industry and they can see a path where our industry becomes a hub of home services, these more sophisticated cleaning companies are able to manage more of the processes and create a bigger, what they call share of wallet. So they use this term a lot in terms of how much the consumer spends with one company. And imagine this as a system of trust and how you pick what companies you do business with. If you were looking at it from a point of view of how many touch points you have with a consumer, it's immense. I mean, if you have a biweekly customer, there's 100 hours that your team is probably spending in their home, not including, reading your emails and other communications that, happen in between cleanings and all that, scorecards, any leave behind you leave in their home. We used to leave our dish soap on their counter when we were more closely associated with the product brand Better Life. And we would refill that every visit just because we believe that physical touch point was so important to always be seen in their home, right? And we're doing some things now where we're going to leave some dishcloths behind because we don't have to refill a dishcloth, and these Swedish kind of microfiber things. But all my point being is we have a bigger opportunity if our industry can grasp some complexities and get to a certain scale that they would be interested in buying us. They're not going to buy $250,000, but they will buy $2 million companies. They're looking for a turnkey solution. And that's where our industry doesn't provide them a solution right now. Let's say they put together a fund with $100 million and they wanted to spend it in our industry today. I don't think they could spend it yet. I don't think there'd be enough companies that would raise their hand and say, it would be tough. And that would be big enough that they would want to deal with. My interest in sharing these thoughts with people is I think there's a race to be the first 10 platform companies. The companies that get to 10 million in the next 3 or 4 years, they're going to do really well. And but it's going to trickle down to the companies doing $1 million or 2 million, and they're going to do really well too. And not to say that there's not going to always be a place for a small company to operate, but it's going to get tougher because these PE-backed companies are going to have amazing benefits for their employees. Like, they're going to professionalize the career. They're going to pay people really well because they realize how expensive turnover is. And we just take it for granted that 300% turnover is okay. And, I don't know what yours is. Ours is 130%. And I still hate, ours is great compared to industry averages. And it still drives me crazy when people leave. I'm just like, what could we have done? How could we have kept them a little longer? What could we have done? Every one of them we dissect and think about, was there another conversation that could have been had? Especially if they were meeting all the other standards of the company. Some turnover is healthy, obviously, but
You're making me think a lot here. Now I've got about 20 questions. I'll try and keep it to 2 on this topic. But one thing that I talked about recently, so I get a lot of questions from people about, is it a good idea to start a cleaning business in 2024? I get the same question in 2023. I got the same question in 2022 and 2021, right? Every year people say, oh, maybe it's too late. Maybe it's too saturated. One interesting aspect I don't see talked about enough is there's a lot of cleaning companies starting, but there's not a lot of cleaning providers. The average age of cleaners now is over 48 in the US. That's the average age of the cleaner, right? It's not old, but in a blue collar, very physically demanding job, that age range is a little bit older because the time span that you can do that work is shorter than you can do office work, right? So I'm curious what you see in terms of demographic shifts within the home services industry, because there's so much interest in the home service space now, whether it's from private equity or from the Department of Labor, for example. There's so much interest in getting more people into the space, but there's very few people entering the space at a young age now. And I'm just thinking 15 to 20 years out, how this ties into demographic changes. Like, I live in Japan, the oldest country in the world, right? And so for us, we're seeing in real time the phasing out of older workers in their 60s and 70s in physical jobs because they physically can't do it anymore, and there's not enough people to replace them. So I'm wondering, as private equity is taking interest in these industries, if you think we'll also see renewed interest in younger people entering the home services space as technicians too, or how do you see that playing out?
It's hard to even go 15 or 20 years out with things that are happening so fast right now. Like I used to try and think like, I'm thinking like 5-year windows now, like, okay. And here's why. What is the labor force going to look like? It's going to look like robots, like robotically assisted at the very least. I mean, not 5 years, but I think the first humanoid prototypes that'll be in people's homes, prototypes, not mass produced, things like that, under 5 years. And the truly wealthy will be investing in those in their homes. And, these devices might be $250,000, but, amortized over 10 years, that might be $60,000, $70,000 a year to have one of these things. And as labor gets more expensive, like, especially for like some specialized tasks in the home, not a general robot yet, right? So 15 years from now, I think you're looking at like technicians that are driving a van around full of like robots, and the van's charging them up between houses. And, you're truly a technician managing robotics and machinery and some other, I mean, if you really want my opinion, 15 years out, that's where I see the industry moving. The technicians will become very specialized and will become very technical and probably very highly paid people. Probably in the range of, today's salaries would be closer to $120,000 a year would be kind of a normal tech position. Like in today's money, 10, 15 years from now, we'll see that. And and our businesses will look vastly different. We will be financing and capitalizing things where we're used to being cash businesses. And we're going to have to learn how to manage capital on a whole nother level, and debt, and like take on risk to be able to be competitive in a world like that. Now, 15 years is still a long ways away, so we can't like get discouraged by that. You could still build one of these businesses, and I think that the biggest problem with why the labor force is older in this is that people don't make it very appealing. Like our labor force is incredibly young. Like, I don't know, I might have 2 technicians over 40. We are not experiencing that phenomenon in our labor pool. Our average technician wage is about $24.50. We have a pretty set path of, we call it a career ladder, where you start off as an apprentice, and then you're a tech, and then you're an advanced tech, and then you're a master tech, and then you're a field supervisor, right? And then there's, for every 50 techs, then there's a field manager who came from the field, and but also, is doing some dispatch and solving problems throughout the day. They're, they might be 20% production still, like they might clean a house, but that's what the 45-year-olds need to be doing, is they need to be managing the 20-year-olds and have a path that looks like that, where, my field managers can make $60,000 in today's money. That's not going to be enough in the future. But that's where it is today. But 10 years from now, as we professionalize the career and PE comes in, economy of scale solves for a lot of that, right? All right, let's say all in my direct labor with credit card processing, because I consider that a fixed cost because we are 100% credit cards. We're at about 48% with all of that. Well, if your admin costs continue because of technology and things like that, if our admin cost shrinks from 11, so at 10 million, let's say our admin cost goes down to 7, you put that extra 4% back into salaries, right? Back right into the field service. You don't necessarily keep that, just for profit. You're going to probably have to reinvest it in being more competitive. And yet you still could have an 18 to 20% EBITDA. All things being equal, I think a $10 million maid service structured like mine could have EBITDA close to 25. You could have what would be net profits. I just want to speak the language that people might be, used to hearing. You'd have net profits of 25%. But I think that's going to shrink down a little bit as you have to reinvest in to make this a really, good job. But I think there's opportunities for us to sell more to consumers too, with better paid techs. Where we're doing home management, putting them on subscriptions where once a month when we come visit, we also do a home checklist and check all the things in their home. And then, we're sending that checklist, into our software, and then that's notifying the plumber that there's a drip, and then the plumber schedules that service all automatically. And it's all one family of companies. But the technicians are more highly trained to identify problems, and we're the first line of attack in maintaining a home. So I see some changes in terms of what the job could be.
I've got two thoughts on returning to an earlier point in your article on the share of wallet concept. I wanted to share one of the things that we do as a contractor-based model, and I wanted to share something that a really interesting company in the UK does that I think might be a good example of this. And I'd like to hear your thought on if this is what you mean in a real life example of share of wallet. So what we do as a contractor model, we are fully 1099s. We don't have employees at all. So there's a lot of trust that if you do the contractor model properly, there is an immense amount of trust that has to be given over the technicians because there's no control that you have over them, right? And so one of the things that we do is we work with a lot of property managers and a lot of student housing associations in the DC area. It's just a big student and internship city because of politics and everything there. One of the things that we do is when we work with property managers, we ask if we can leave a card behind when we do move out cleans. So at the end of a move out clean, before the new person has moved in, we leave a little card and we just let them know, hey, this home was cleaned by Think Maids. We know you may not need a cleaner. If you do, please give us a call, but there will come a time where you need a handyman or an electrician or a plumber. We know great ones for all of those and more. So if you find yourself needing something fixed in your home, please give us a call and we'll connect you with some of the best in the city. We use that as a sort of
smart play.
Yes, it's a way that we try and, speaking bluntly, it's a way that we try and make referral business for ourselves, right? We refer it to them, we take a cut of it, and that whole game. We're, in that sense, from the customer's perspective, we're trying to be an all-in-one solution for them. On the back end, we're just a cleaning company referring out that other work to plumbers and electricians. So we're not involved in that work at all. But from the customer's perspective, we are managing and assigning those jobs for them.
You're actually reaching out to the contractors and scheduling the work for them?
So we connect them together and we get notified when they've come to an agreement that the job has taken place. But they're not in our booking software.
Oh, cool.
We're not charging the customer's card for that. The contractor, the electrician, for example, he would then pay us a monthly fee for the customers that we brought. And typically those are one-time jobs. The cleaning is pretty unique in that it's recurring. But that's kind of what we do to try and get to be an end-to-end solution a little bit more than normal. But what I really wanted to get to, there's a really interesting company in the UK. You may have heard of them already. They're called Fantastic Services. They're really notable because they grew from 0 to about 20 million a year in revenue ridiculously quickly. It was in like 2.5 years or something. But what they did was really smart. They started with cleaning, so they were fantastic cleaners at first. But what they did was they created a membership that their customers could pay for. It was a £99 a year membership, which is like $120 or so. And by joining that membership, you get a discount on all of their related services that they offer. So if you do need to book a plumber or an electrician through them, you get a very favorable rate, something like 30% off the service each time. So they were able to actually capture thousands of customers their first year with their membership who were just cleaning customers originally. And then as soon as the membership started, they were able to add technicians for all these other services and become an all-in-one home service residentially for their customers. Now, I thought that was a really interesting way of doing it because it was kind of like a ground up.
Yeah.
It was all built up from the ground up, just starting with cleaning. So I was curious if that's kind of a good example for you of a share of wallet type of service.
First off, I love their website, their marketing, and their branding is great. Where I think that they're kind of falling a little bit is they're not necessarily generating the reviews and the quality that I think it's going to take to be sustainable in that space. I mean, here's the way I see like quality. It's 5s or nothing. The distribution of like, if somebody gives you less than a 5, like 5 is like almost table stakes now, like as far as like what people's like, they're going to give out like, scores and what I've seen is they're growing fast, but I think you've got to get the operational excellence part right. So if they figure that out, then I think that they'll be a $2 billion company and not just a $20 million. Like that, like they're on the right track. I'm a quarter of their size, so I don't want to, like I'm not trying to besmirch them. I see the reviews. I've been following them a little bit, and I think that if they get that right, they're going to be huge. If they can manage the quality control and the consumer expectations, and end to end, when I think of share of wallet, it's got to be such a good experience that residential cleaning service done right, average customer will spend, I can pull it out of my database, but it's over 11,000 for us, is kind of like the average recurring customer. That obviously gets weighed down by one times and things like that. But so if you get that right and you throw that $11,000 or $10,000, whatever that number is for your company, and I know companies where that might be 20,000 because their churn is even less than ours, and their customer attrition is even tighter, or they're in a market where there's no competition, they're the only show in town, and whatever it is, you throw on. That company provides an end-to-end solution. The carpet needs to be cleaned, the windows. Oh, you know what? The furnace broke. I just call the home management company and do it. But every one of those touch points needs to be awesome. And I think that this is where PE, where they want to do it, is they want to have control over every one of those transactions versus, think Maids is great, but they referred me to this ding-dong company that I don't like very much.
Sure.
Because so you don't have control over what they do. You do in the sense you don't have to keep giving them any referrals, but you can't solve a problem for that customer if they're not happy. And so that it's a little thing, right? And it's unlikely to be like in total a huge issue, but you're capturing some share of wallet. Fantastic Clean is doing it, and I think like that from a design and architecture of how you would like sell it to consumers, I think they're 100% right. Like their model is right on the money. You throw in some controls on that and you make it so that like that they're putting out more 5-star reviews. I think that they'll be cruising. So if you're listening, guys, I'm not saying that you're not crushing it. I just think you could be 5 times bigger already, if you were focusing on that excellence part, those 5 stars.
It's interesting because the way you describe it to me is almost like a in-house team, but not in-house, right? We see this a little bit in Airbnb and property management where they'll have an in-house handyman, they'll have an in-house cleaning team. They have everything as much as they can to be in-house just from a cost perspective. But almost sounds like the way you're describing share of wallet is you want You want to be able to provide that end-to-end in-house service to residential clients rather than big businesses, although of course to them as well, but still not be an in-house team, right? To give them that experience of everything under one roof, but still be an independent company.
I think that even the technology side, they might be slightly separate companies, but from the consumer's perspective, they're going to get billed from one place. So my thoughts is that Better Life is no longer Better Life Maids. We have the trademark for all home services under the brand Better Life, right? Maids goes away, and Better Life is a brand, and it's a lifestyle brand, and it's a subscription, and so eventually, like, we're working in a PE-backed company, and maybe the electrician is branded separately, but we're able to book everything, and it goes right into their CRM and charges them, and they're invoiced under the Better Life brand. And it's very seamless, even though they might be like different branded companies. Eventually, maybe everything comes under the Better Life brand, because I think that that's a lifestyle kind of brand name, sort of like the fantastic services. So when we picked our name, Better Life Maids, we also wanted to make sure we could trademark all services, and under that as well. We've always had that vision. I just think it's becoming closer and closer. We got to put, you got to put the horse before the cart, right? Like, you can't get ahead of yourself too big or too far. And this is still all thinking out, still 3-4 years away before I think we're even close to next steps in any of this stuff. This is all, pretty hypothetical at this point. And, I wouldn't suggest anyone think that this would be what they should do first. What I think they should do first is just build an operationally excellent house cleaning company that is dominant in their market and is best in breed operationally. Like, so focus on, and what I mean by operations is like, don't do crappy cleaning and think you're a good marketing company. Like, I see that, like, it's sort of, you have to deliver a really, really great experience to customers in this industry. And at least for what's going to happen next, because you get to a certain size, and if you're losing 8% of your customers a month, you're going to turn over your entire list every year. That's not very profitable. Or it's going to be, it's still profitable, but it's going to be a whole heck of a lot less so.
Yeah, that client retention is another big subject, huh? We'll pause that one for another, because I have strong feelings about that one. People using their marketing money and then not working on their retention kills me. But I just want to take this back to the average business owner in the cleaning industry, or thinking of starting a cleaning business. So we're talking at quite a high level around private equity firms, around share of wallet, around expanding to related home services. If you're a new cleaning business owner, or you're interested in starting a cleaning business this year, would you recommend that they start a cleaning business, or is there another home service you feel might be a better entry point at this time? And is there a specific strategy you'd recommend they employ for building a solid foundation?
I mean, what I don't love about this industry is the revenue per technician. Like, if you know another trade,
I hear you.
Like, if you're in garage doors, those guys are doing $500,000 per tech, right? Chris, you know the industry pretty well. We do about $100,000 to $120,000 a tech. Is that normal, or is that probably a little bit higher than what you typically see?
I think it's unusually high, actually. So,
yeah, it is. So you want to know a funny fact is, at like $350 a month, how many techs do you think we have?
350,000 a month, and each technician's doing 120,000 a year, roughly.
Yeah, let's say it's 100.
Okay, maybe 22, 23.
No, I mean, no, that would be, it's about 8,000 a head per month, so it's about 40.
Okay,
right? But I know companies our size that have 70 techs, and a lot of it's like part-time this and part-time that, and you got to give us 4 days a week, and you got to give us 30 allowed hours in those 4 days. Like, so if you're only going to work 4 days, you're probably going to clean on average 2.5-3 houses a day. So I'll let someone work 4 days, have some flexibility in their schedule, but we want them to be an earner too. We want them to be making good money here. And, we have a lot of folks making, close to $30 an hour, because they figured out our system and they still can deliver the quality. And they'll rock out 3 houses a day and still be done by 4 o'clock. Anyway, getting into all that, is it a good opportunity? Yes, but the revenue per technician, the return on your investment in human capital and people is lower than other trades. If all things were equal and you've got $100,000 to put into another business, I don't know any other businesses where you can put as little into it and build something. There's very little regulation. There's very little like stopping you from being successful.
It's true.
So a lot of it is going to be on you and how you want to run a business. I don't think it's an easy business. They watch some trainings online and like bought a guru's class. And I think those people do them one disservice. They give them the information. That's all great, but they don't really tell the truth about how hard this business is. And I think when I was at about 500,000, I still had a full-time job and I might have given up. Like you talked about a little bit, people get burnt out. At 500,000, I hated this business. It was eating me alive. And then I quit my full-time job and it got better. Like trying to run a full-time, like you know more people than I do that are kind of in that space, but I can tell you it's hard. So if you're going to do it, just, be prepared to give up something too. You're going to give up some time. It's not going to just all be plus. There's going to be some give that you're going to give back to it. So,
God,
if you're trying to bootstrap it, especially,
this is a good point actually. And it's funny because in some way I feel I've contributed to this problem because I'm kind of the remote cleaning business guy, right? But I actually never tell people it's an easy business. I tell them you're going to work your ass off for 12 to 18 months to get a foundation built. And then you can start to think about bringing in a VA. And then you can start to think about, maybe working a little bit less than 10 hours a day. But I typically counsel them that first year and a half is a lot of work, man. It was the same for me. I was at about 20 to 30,000 a month, not about $500,000 a year yet, when I was a full-time student, and it was just too much. I was just freaking out, dropping the ball. That's actually why I got the VA in the first place. That's what started the VA company. I was like, I can't take this. This is too much to do two full-time things at once, right? It's a mutual friend of ours. I feel like I mention this every podcast. Derek Christian, he came up with a great term to describe this stage of the cleaning business. He calls it the valley of despair, where you're kind of in that 15 to 30K a month mark, where you're busy, you're juggling all the hats, but you're not really growing. You're not profitable enough to bring someone on to help. I think it's such a perfect encapsulation of like how people feel at that stage in business. They haven't broke through that barrier yet, and it's not that everything is sunshine on the other side, but things do get easier when you really have hit your stride,
They do. And that's what I'll say. Like $1 million today isn't what it used to be, but like, man, like, okay. So if you're running things well and you're at 15% net profit, so there's $150,000, like, well, it's probably more than that because you probably in that is that you've got 10% probably like overhead towards management. So you probably have like 2 people helping you out at that point. Maybe if they're VAs, you might have 3 or 4, and you're specializing your people. And, I don't think about it as VAs because we've typically developed our own talent, but I think I have a really good friend that also does some nearshore stuff with South America, things like that. But, he's really big on it and, always tries to sell me on it. And I know that I have some, control issues probably where I just like want it to be our way. And like, but for the person that just needs support, I definitely see it. I would pick my tasks carefully. Like I wouldn't be delegating financial controls and other things like that. But, like I think there's things that I would give up and I would have given up sooner if I had the option. Cause I'll tell you, we almost did walk away at 500,000. I was an airline pilot making good money. And I was questioning my sanity of like, what am I doing here? Like I have the American dream. I have a great job. I make good money. What am I doing? And, so yeah, maybe a VA would have probably like made that a non-question. Cause, I remember going on a vacation and everything was going off the rails.
Well, I just want to add a little nuance to this too. My goal wasn't to grow as big as possible, and it still isn't. My goal is to have as much time freedom as possible to spend with my wife and my dog and so on, right? That's what the cleaning business's goal was. So for people who were strongly oriented towards growth, the time that you bring on someone to help in the office really does matter. If you bring them on too early, I am of the opinion it will cripple your growth. So when people come to us from day one and they want a VA, I typically tell them no, and I give them a suggested plan of growth and suggested points to add certain systems before bringing someone on. But I think there's such a strong desire nowadays for people to build a company without having to build it themselves with their own hands. I think on the one hand, that's very attractive and it's like a smart way to grow if you can manage it. But on the other, I think people are becoming averse to growing their companies. You know, they want like a pre-made, done-for-you business solution. And you can do done-for-you services for certain parts of the business. If you're a really good Facebook ads expert, you can do done-for-you Facebook ads. If you're a really good VA agency, you can do done-for-you admin services. But I'm finding people want like a fully done-for-you business that they pay a couple $1,000 for and it's going to grow. And I don't know that that's ever going to happen, right? I think it's a different type of person entering the industry is I think what I'm saying. Let's move that aside. There is two questions generally I had for you before we wrapped up. These are kind of a little bit more broad with regards to the discussion we were just having. But I think because this is the first time I've had a chance to interview on the show, I wanted to get your perspective on these for my students who'll be watching. So I often talk about my mentors in the cleaning industry. I've actually mentioned your early conversation that we had back in 2016 as an impactful moment for me. I mentioned Derek Christian. I've had conversations with him. He was very helpful. There are certain people in the industry who really made an impact on me in certain ways in my growth trajectory. So I was curious if you have certain mentors that you look up to in the cleaning industry, or maybe certain business mentors who might not be in the cleaning industry, but who've had a big impact on your business trajectory. I'd be curious to hear who they are, what they've contributed to who Matt is.
I'll talk about like different stages of growth and things that were helpful. Like early days, ISSA, like just joining that trade association and meeting lots of people, right? Big. And that's where I met Tom, Derek. So Tom Stewart, Derek Christian, Liz Trotter, and became pretty good friends with them. Even I've had businesses with them. So, we've started businesses together over the years, cleaning businesses, software businesses, like all kinds of stuff, right? So ISSA was big. I think some early coaching that I got from Sharon Timber, like very, very early stage, just on cleaning processes, was incredibly helpful. So Sharon, if you get a hold of this, I'll give you a plug. I think Debbie's stuff for people like Debbie Sardone, for people that are, 0 to 30,000 a month, I think is really valuable. Maybe even $500,000. I know she's pushing her green jacket to $1 million, but I think you probably can elevate past that at a certain point. Liz Trotter for companies like, $500,000 to $1.5 million, $2 million, I think is teaching excellent information. Tom Stewart for businesses that are approaching $1 million, and he's not really a coach anymore, but the way that Maids Central is structured as a software, you get smarter as a business. My business wouldn't be where it is if I weren't adopting the principles that Tom built into Maids Central. And a lot of that comes from his, his early career and what he saw as gaps in terms of production management software. He's taking this from a different angle in terms of productivity, efficiency, and generating more revenue per technician so that they can make more money and have a better job, right? Right now, as I'm kind of getting to the, $4 million to $10 million range, I've joined Tommy Mello's coaching program, Home Service Freedom. I don't think you need to be as large as $4 million to get value out of that, but $1 million now, I think it might be a good investment. It's, maybe $18,000 a year for that program. So that's starting to get a little steep. And then I'm in EO, which is some maybe all kinds of stuff here, but I'm in EO, which is Entrepreneurs Organization, which any business that gets over $1 million should join. And once you're over $250,000, you should probably join their accelerator program just for the connections and being around other smart people, because it's very lonely doing this. And I know that you can talk to people on Facebook, but they don't have the same problems that you have. They don't have the same worries that you have. Your peer group's going to change, and surrounding yourself with like-minded people is incredibly valuable and worth the price of admission.
It's very important.
EO Accelerator might be $2,000 a year.
When you brought up Entrepreneurs Organization, I know it's not specific to the cleaning industry. I think it's an interesting one to join, though, and I agree. one of the things that has been very important in my life has been taking subject matter experts from a totally different area of my life and applying them to my business and vice versa. Like for me, more than any business mentor who's had a big impact on my business has been my fitness and movement coach. Right? He's nothing to do with business, right? But his conversations and his talk with me about balance in life and in your movement, your business, have been so impactful that I've taken so many concepts from our conversations down to a very practical level and put them into my business. So my business is a reflection of different areas of my life and different people that I've met now. And I'm sure it's the same for you. It can be hard to think of examples, I think, sometimes on the spot. But taking, I wouldn't know how, but I'm sure your experience as an airline pilot must have played some role in your experience as a business owner too.
Absolutely. As you were saying that, I was thinking about like just a lot of early lessons. What I will say is some of what I thought I would transfer from that, like the structure, like some of it really makes sense for process, but the people portion of this business it's so different. Like, all the rules and structure that you have at an airline that you think like, like really rigid, like, attendance policies, and like, you got to just love on people so much harder in this business than like, the airlines, whatever, like it's a very militaristic kind of like structure. And I tried to like enforce that early on, and that was not going to work. Those of you that come from military backgrounds, airline backgrounds, things like that are very rigid. Take the processes, but the way they treated you as a person, forget all of that and treat people a lot better than they treated you.
It's funny, that's very true. I don't know if you know, but my wife is a flight attendant for a Japanese airline.
Okay.
And we have frequent discussions about how they treat her. It's interesting industry, man. It's a very incredible industry to aspire to, but it's a very difficult industry to be in, I think.
It's been maybe 14 years since I've done it professionally, but I still remember my number because it made everything, because we're a number there. I was 248560. It's so I can still spit that out 15 years later because it meant everything in terms of like seniority and what I got, like, like my bids. But it was, you are like, it's a different hierarchy of how I would never want to work at a place like that. So trying to take lessons from those places, you have to like, what are the good things? And then the way they treat people, man.
Very true. Like, and to add on to that, I think what's really interesting, the airline industry highlights something, the power of benefits too. A lot of small business owners are not able to offer benefits, or if they're contractor models, they can't at all. But one of the things I noticed is when people become flight attendants, they know it's a hard industry. And I'm sure this is true for pilots too, but they love the travel benefits that come with the job. And so they'll actually put up with a lot of shit to get the benefit that comes with the job. I'm just circling back in my head to the private equity firms that we talked about earlier, who are going to be able to come in and offer these benefits. So I think there's an interesting future discussion to have around how a small cleaning business could foster loyalty when they don't have the scaling benefit abilities that a bigger firm would be able to offer cleaners. So that might be an interesting point to talk on in the future sometime too.
I mean, I know the exact number every month that hits my account for benefits and how much it costs. And it's not a cheap thing to do, but it's economy of scale. It becomes like it's probably 3% of revenue, like at our size. It's so important to people. And I know that a lot of people that are at like 5 years, 7 years, 10 years with my company, if we hadn't offered benefits a couple of years ago, I don't know if they'd be with us. So I think it's gonna matter more in terms of career path. And I have a friend he's in YPO, which is like another level above EO. We're not gonna get into all that, but you got to be like $15 million a year business. And I'm not on his level yet. He's like, he owns an electrical firm here in St. Louis, and he offers full benefits to the family too. So we have really good health benefits.
Yep.
And we're only asking our employees to do $25 a pay period, and we're covering like 300 of it. And I think that's kind of right in today's dollars. But if you were to do family, it might be like 100, it jumps up like 150 a pay. It goes up quite a bit, right? So they're 100% on the family. He thinks it really matters in terms of attracting talent and keeping talent, and to offer not just benefits, but exceptional benefits, better than because he's fighting the union jobs too. He's a non-union shop.
Got it.
So he's trying to offer wages and benefits better than the union, and they can still bid on union jobs as long as their prevailing wages are higher, or I guess jobs that have prevailing wages like city contracts and stuff like that.
Ooh, that is exceptional. I want to wrap up with the final question. It may be that Better Life Maids is the main focus, but one thing that's typically true of business owners that I know is we're all serial entrepreneurs a little bit. It's hard for us to do just one project. And so I'm curious if there's another upcoming project or something that you've had on the back burner for a couple of years you feel very strongly about doing. Aside from Better Life Maids, is there any business venture or any big project that we're going to be seeing you heading over the next couple of years? Or are you very, very focused on Better Life?
Very, very focused today. I bit off more than I could chew trying to be 2 full-time, C-level people. I was in Maids Central as a partner for 2 years, and that's really hard to do on 2 really high growth companies and leading, teams. I decided that I valued my time and health more than, I'll tell you, one of my primary motivators is learning and grow, like educational growth, like knowledge. So if you were to entice me, what would be the thing that would be the most enticing thing that you could do? It's not money. It's not even time freedom. It's how much can I know? I really believe that. I am driven by that. And I was learning so much, but it was just too much. So I'm gonna focus on this for the next 3 years and see where we get to. I believe we can get to roughly 10 million a year. Maybe push that out another year if we have to. But I think some really interesting things will start happening in the industry when $10 million cleaning companies becomes more normal. I think it's going to be good for all. I think rising tide will lift all boats. We talked about those crazy exits I was describing. I'm not saying we didn't really get to the answer today, as those aren't happening because interest rates are higher. That's gonna push down on some of those crazy exits that were happening 3-4 years ago. But I do believe that our industry is poised for a transformation, and I think those of us that are in it for the long run and aren't just trying to make a quick buck, build and flip and whatever. I think there's some real opportunity for people that actually really enjoy this industry and being of service to it. So
very much agree. I think the first attempts at that were kind of the Ubers of the house cleaning industry about 10 years ago, so to speak, and they did not do so well. But I think this second round of more experienced PE firms coming in, I think it's going to make a very different industry in 10 years. So I'm excited to see that. I hope to be a part of it in some form or another. I suspect that'll change.
There were some hard lessons.
5 years. Yeah.
There were some hard lessons that they learned, and I think, again, I talked about operational excellence. They neglected that in an effort to scale, and they figured that market share would solve all problems, but they were losing. This covers a whole lot of ground that we already covered, and we can wrap up. But they were losing more customers out the back faster than they could gain them. And I don't know at HomeJoy or whatever the newest thing that's out there now, what their intentions are. I don't believe it's all bad. I just don't believe that they're able to deliver on their promises of $19 cleanings and that sort of thing, because they're not focused on delivering an excellent experience or a delightful experience. They're focused on the marketing. And it's proven time and time again that this is not a marketing play. That will only get you so big and make you so much money. And they're just changing their name every 3 months. So that leads me to think that they might have some nefarious intent.
Just a little bit.
I don't want to I don't know that that's the case. And I've been accused of being naive and thinking the best of people and being too optimistic sometimes. And I generally don't think people are bad, but something's not right there. And I think we need to not be just focused on acquiring customers and costs.
And that's a good ending point, I think, is you can have the best marketing in the world, but you actually have to deliver a good quality service too. Otherwise, what you're building isn't sustainable in any sense of the word. So I think it still comes back to focusing on the core customer experience and service that you're providing. It has to come back to that. Otherwise, it's just not really a business, so to speak. It's a promise, but it's a little more than that.
I agree.
I'm going to link everyone to the article that you wrote on LinkedIn. Matt Talks Business is your consulting business. Would you prefer that I link everyone there? Would you prefer Better Life Maids? What's your preferred way of
Just
reaching?
probably to my LinkedIn profile probably is the best thing to do. Like, and then those articles, like you can just put out one of the articles and they can find me on LinkedIn there. That's probably the best thing to do. So I will be perfectly transparent is that I do some speaking and consulting, but I don't do like any consulting for, businesses, more for like product and services for the industry. So if they're looking for a coach or something like that, I'm not the person, but I'm happy to point them towards people that I think are excellent, just so they get their expectations right, that I'm not a coach and I don't do that kind of one-on-one kind of work.
Very good. We'll link everyone. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.